I've been through some things, a whole lot of things. I guess they thought I wouldn't make it. I guess they thought I would fall on my face and just stay there. But baby, that's just not who I am.
Hey, what's going on, you all? Listen, I get the opportunity today to have a conversation with just a very special guest. But look, I wanted to let you know that her story is a personal story about grief, loss, and the passing of both of her parents. So please listen with care and take the space that you need if this topic is just a little bit sensitive for you, okay? Especially if you yourself have lost parents or loved ones and those areas kind of trigger you just a little bit. So what we're going to do though is we are going to tune in and we're going to remind ourselves that we're here as a community to grow together in effort to heal together. All right, you guys, let's get into this episode. Welcome back, first of all, to the From Grief to Purpose podcast. As always, I am your host, Manina Smith, a life coach and grief coach. I have to ask one request, and y'all already know what it is. Listen, if you are watching the podcast episode today and you have not subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and click that subscribe button, follow us, like the episodes, and get this information because I'm going to have some great guests for you. Just like today, I have a very special guest for you on today. Okay, so let me introduce you to our new friend. Her name is Brittney Davis. She is a 3-time published author, poet, spoken word artist, and part-time entrepreneur from Saginaw, Michigan. She began writing early as a way to cope with trauma, and after coming to faith, discovered the power of expressing herself through Jesus and creativity. Her mission is to create a safe space through her writing, offering comfort and affirmation and encouragement. Brittney has served in ministry, the criminal justice system, and the arts. She's the founder of Ready Writer Books, where she helps aspiring authors complete their projects and explore publishing options. As a as a founding member of Collective Variety Poetry Group, she's passionate about helping others share their stories, especially with those who need them. Listen, welcome. Help me welcome you all. Give her a very warm welcome in your hearts. Brittney, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Listen, absolutely. Again, thank you for taking the time out of your day and coming on to just have a conversation with me. And we're going to get into your journey. But before we get started, because I don't know if I pronounced that city correctly, pronounce that again. Where exactly were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Saginaw, Michigan. So you got it right.
Okay, Saginaw, Michigan. And where is that located? Because I've never heard of that.
Have you heard of Flint, Michigan?
Yes, I've heard of Flint.
Saginaw is 30 minutes north of Flint, Michigan.
Okay. Nice. I'm familiar a little bit, because that's the Midwest region, right?
Yep.
Is it? Okay. I'm familiar because I have a family in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So
okay, that's well, it's kind of far, but not on a map. It doesn't look far.
Okay. Okay. Because I was like, wait, where exactly is that? Very interesting. Okay. So listen, I want to, get to know you a little bit more. When I first heard about your journey and your story, I was very inspired, just like with what you are currently doing, as far as like, I saw the loss of your parents, I was like, that's very similar to my own personal journey. Because a lot of times people don't understand, like, I know for myself, like losing both parents, it felt like, like you're all of a sudden now this, I don't know, orphan, you're like an adult orphan. So I experienced that. But so when you were, when I saw like what you were doing in business and, entrepreneurship and, what you do with like your publishing and poetry, I was just awed because I was like, wow, this is definitely a story that, I want to highlight on this particular podcast. So let me know. I want to know what first drew you to writing. Like, was there a moment where it became more than just an outlet for you? What was it?
Yeah, so I always say I've been writing for as long as I can remember. I remember having like diaries and journals growing up, and I would like write my day out and everything that happened. And then around high school, I started getting into poetry. I just started, I don't know how it happened. I think maybe it was a way to kind of like code my feelings. So to like write in code. I think that's like where I'm pinpointing it. Yeah, I would be writing to kind of mask what I actually felt and put it into metaphors. And so I think I started writing around high school, poetry. Then I started, when I was an adult, I started blogging. I never really thought that I was going to be an author. I was just blogging encouragement. I was blogging my feelings. And I noticed that I was writing about my dad a lot. And so when I went to my blog, I started pulling those blogs out. I started making them private, and I turned my blog into a devotional. And so that's where my first book came from. I was noticing that with my blogs, people were encouraged. I was noticing that with poetry, people were, motivated, and it was showing them, that they can be honest in their feelings. And so I noticed that my words had power and that it was a gift. It wasn't just something that I was passively doing. So I think it started from about high school. That's when I noticed that my words had impact.
Wow. So like you turn journaling into recognizing like, no, this is a gift. Like I have a gift to write. Like this is something that like God is using me to do. So let me be obedient
Yeah.
and do it. That's beautiful. Cause I always say like, cause I was, a past like journaler growing up too. I think when you're younger, you're not really realizing like, this is going to be something great. I'm going to be a writer one day. You're just trying to write your feelings down, for whatever reason, not being able to talk it out, or maybe you just feel like expressing it on paper is a much better outlet for you. Like, how did you feel like for as far as like therapeutic purposes, like what actually did journaling back then do for you?
Yeah. So I don't think that people around me really had the capacity or the emotional intelligence back then to know what losing my mother at such a young age had done. I didn't even know. And so I didn't talk a lot. I was quiet. I'm still quiet sometimes, but I was very, very quiet back then. I wasn't one that was going to tell you how I was feeling. I used journaling as a way to write how I was feeling. And so I think that was my outlet. I think that was therapy for me back then. Back then, I'm saying like early 2000s, like 2000
Okay.
to 2006. Like that's when I really started journaling. So I think that back then that was my therapy, because there was no go to therapy in the early 2000s. It was just you're a kid, be a kid, depress them dishes, all that stuff.
Yes.
so,
Uh-huh.
so yeah, I think writing was my therapy.
Wow. So now, because right now, you are a successful entrepreneur, right? You have all these amazing things going on. But as you mentioned, right, you did lose your mother. And what age were you, when you lost your mother?
I was 3 months old when I lost my mother. So I was raised by my dad in a single parent household.
Wow, 3 months old. Like, so how did that impact you then growing up? And like, when did you realize, 3 months, you're still a baby. So of
Yeah.
course, like the impact is not there initially. You're not recognizing it until, I don't know, like what age did you feel like you were like, okay, they've, informed you obviously of, your mother is, no longer living. What age did you find out that, that was your case? I'm not sure if your dad remarried or what was the situation. And then like, how did they transition you through that process?
I think my grandmothers played a very pivotal part. And so I didn't really feel a void until I was in high school, until I was in a youth group, and the moms of the girls that were in the youth group would meet, and at that point it's like, oh, my grandmother is here, or at that time, like, my dad's wife was here. It wasn't my mother. And so that's when I really started feeling the void. But my father's mother, she was like my mother until I was 14. And so she passed away when I was 14. And so I was very, very close to my grandmother, even though she had 11 other grandchildren. I'm like, no, I am the grandchild. Yeah. But she had her own relationship with all of us to make us feel like we had our individual relationships with her. And so I think that my grandmother and then my mom's stepmom, she's blood. You can't tell me anything different. we are still close to this day. She was at every basketball game, every concert. She picked me up from school every day. She spent the night at our house because my dad was a firefighter, so he was 24 hours at work, 24 hours off. And so I think that my family, the women in my life, my aunties, my dad's sisters, like they all did a good job of filling the void as much as they could, until I got to high school. And I'm like, oh no, there's something missing. There's a pivotal part of my identity that I haven't been able to grab hold of because I didn't know her and she wasn't there. And so I think that's when I started realizing that there was a void.
Okay. And so how did you begin to cope with that void of knowing that your birth mother was a missing piece in your growing up, up to be, because I think at what high school, what for me was like, you're at that point, you're at that pivotal point, like we're about to be women, you're about to go on to like young adulthood and off to bigger things. But with that missing piece in your particular life being your mom, how did you start to heal that void?
Yeah, so I would ask questions to, like, I have an older brother who's 11 years older than me. So by the time he was going off to college, I was only 4. And so we had reconnected as much as we could. He was a professional basketball player, so he played overseas. He wasn't back at home that much. But when he was back at home, my senior year, actually the summer after my senior year, we had a lot of hard conversations. We had a lot of conversations about like who our mom was. I reconnected with my biological grandmother around the age of 17 or 18, and she would tell me a lot about who my mother was. And so I felt like those pieces were being kind of added in, once I was like venturing into adulthood. And people will always tell me about my mom, and at first it felt kind of invasive, like especially if they weren't family. It was like, oh, your mom is this, your mom is that. And for me at the time as a teenager, I'm like, well, good for you, you got to know her. And so I wasn't really like taking it in, like processing. And so I think like once I was able to like mature a little bit, I was able to take those stories and recognize like the similarities in our personality, the similarities, in our faith. And I was able to kind of like build an idea of who my mother was based off of, my brother, my grandmothers, and other people around me that have been close to her.
Nice. So would you when you were like when they were telling you about your mom and you weren't really receiving it, were you like kind of angry that they were like they knew her and you hadn't known her? Was it just like you just weren't really hearing them at the time?
I don't think I was angry. I just wasn't hearing them. I kind of was maybe frustrated, that people would look at me and then make comments about her without realizing the impact that that might have had on me. Um, but in maturity, you realize that everybody's not thinking that way. So where I am a more like empathetic person, I wonder what the impact of my words are going to do to people. I realize that everybody isn't like that, but that just took time.
Yeah, that's so true though. Like awareness, like empathetic awareness, especially around certain very sensitive situations. Sometimes you just don't want to like pop off and say whatever. So that's a good point to bring up about that, just in case anyone is listening out there. Be sensitive to like another person's situation because everything doesn't need to be commented on at that time and moment. But so let's highlight like your mom real quickly. Just before we go into the other questions that I want to ask you. I have so many, but who was your mom? Like after you found out like who she is, like what kind of person was she? Like who was she? What did she do? What did you learn about her?
Yeah, so my mom was a hairstylist, not just a hairstylist, but she owned her own hair salon. My brother would tell the story of how she gave a mink coat off of her back to somebody who said that they liked the coat. I would say that her, like, coming from like what my aunt would tell me, like her and my dad were a match made in heaven. They would show up, together, looking the best, driving the best, and not that that was even their heart. That was just like they cared about style. But they were both very like giving people. My mother, from what I've heard, was very generous. She would create opportunities for people and just kind. My brother is always saying how we're very similar. He also makes comments on like my smart mouth and how like I got that from her too. So
Of course, he would say that.
like the wit and the sharp tongue. So yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Listen, so with you being this successful person that you are, you have this, journey, but I know life is still happening. Is there any point where, faith played a role in like your life, like with your creativity and who you are as a woman?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are legacies that I received like from God because of my mother too. So I think that um I am like carrying the point of where she left off. My mother was a speaker. She was heavy in her faith. My brother and me just recently had a conversation about how she fasted a lot because I took him out to lunch and I was fasting with my church, and he was like, "Oh, mom used to do that all the time." And so I think that faith has been crucial, and I love how interesting it is that my mother never really got a chance to shape me in God and shape me in faith, but at the same time, like, God has carried me to this place where um my very like foundation is built on him and him alone. And so faith is crucial. Without God, I would not have been able, I think, to move forward in my life. I believe that I would have been stuck in cycles of grief and stuck in cycles of pain that wouldn't have allowed me to keep going. I think my faith is what pushes me to live, honestly, to live past the hurt and to live past the grief. And so faith is very crucial. Everything I write about is from the foundation of my faith in God.
Now, what was your mom's name? What was her name?
Her name was Rhonda
Rhonda. What was her last name?
Gardner. That was my maiden name. Yeah.
Gardner.
Rhonda Webb Gardner. Yep.
Rhonda Webb Gardner. We honor her. We honor her on today. I always like to mention the names of those loved ones that have gone on because, I always see them as they were a physical body in this earth at one point before they transitioned. They lived the purpose that they were able to live to the time that they were able to live it. Obviously, have beautiful children still here. The legacy is still going on. So I just want to take a minute to honor her. But you mentioned a moment, right? That I think sometimes we don't touch on a lot when you do lose a parent at a very early age. You lost your mother at a very, very, early age. So she didn't get a chance to shape you, from a baby, at 3 months into your, womanhood. Me on the flip side, I lost my mother at 17. So I still had some awareness like of her, but there was a cutoff for me at 17. And at 17 for me, I was like, when she, transitioned, I was like, okay, what am I supposed to do now? Like, wait a minute, hold up. I'm not, finished growing and developing as a woman. So how did that impact you? Like, how did you feel as far as that particular void? How did you shape yourself outside of like your own, the support group that you had, though? How did you, the individual, come to that realization? Like, okay, I gotta teach myself this. I gotta get through this. I gotta get through that. Like, was it just the faith that took you there, or the support group, or was it something that you were pulling from within? How did that go for you?
Yeah, I think that I don't want to overlook the fact that my grandmother and my aunts were there. Although they weren't my mother, they were there. And so a lot of, teaching me about womanhood came from them. I will say that emotionally and personality wise, I don't think I was anything like my aunts and my grandmother. And so I think that that had to come with maturity in being okay with who I was. For example, I'm very sensitive, and I'm not gonna just brush my feelings under the rug. I'm going to cry, and it's okay to cry. I'm going to, process through my emotions, and that's okay. But I don't think that I was able to really like stand in that until probably like early 30. I'm 37, so probably like 30s, because I had to realize that this was okay. And because I didn't have that other part of me, that probably would my mother probably would have been emotive and taught me how to navigate through that, because she was the same way. I think that I had to grow into that, and I think that came with maturity and just assurance in who I was and who God created me to be and how he created me. Because a part of me being okay with expressing emotions is him. It's so I can feel. It's so that I can understand what other people are going through in order to encourage them through him. So I think that that came with maturity, being able to be okay with who I was and who I was created to be without that other side present.
Do you have like any thoughts like now as you're like going through the stages? Because you know how we transition as women, like your 20s are different, your 30s are different, your 40s are going to be different, right? Do you ever have those moments where you're like, well, dang, I wish my mom was here. She could like teach me this or teach me that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have two children of my own now, and so I think that we, like you said, it's transitions, right? And so you have that initial stage of grief, and then like when I got married, it was I wish my dad was here. And then when I had children, it was like I wish my mom was here. And so it's like at every pivotal transitional point in my life, I have had those moments where, yeah, like that, it's another layer of grief that you didn't know was present until you transition into different life experiences.
Mm. So now let's segue then to your father, because you said you lost your father. At what age were you when he passed away? And what happened? Like if you can share a little bit of detail.
Yeah, for sure. So today's actually my dad's death date. So he passed away 3 days after my 21st birthday in
Mm.
2009. And so my father was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer when I was 18. I was in my freshman year of college at Michigan State University, go green. And he was healed from colon cancer. And so when he was going into the hospital, he was going to get a colostomy bag reversal. He was very excited because he was going to have a different level of life again. And I remember after the surgery, everything went well. I was going back to the hospital to tell him that I was going back to school and I would come back in a couple of days. Well, he had started having complications, and so he was like, "It's okay to leave." So immediately, I remember hearing him talk about how when his father passed away, he left the hospital, and by the time he had like came back, his father had passed away, and so I was petrified to leave him. And so it turns out he had to be, I think he threw a blood clot to his lung or something like that. He went to the ICU, and he had stayed alive, for like a week and a half. I was back and forth between college and my hometown, which is an hour and a half drive. What didn't make a big deal. I got a call. I got a he actually sorry Me and my uncle were in the hospital with him a couple like the day after my birthday, and we heard him in there with the nurse. And then after that, he was like, give me a hug, I love you. And I went back to school that night. And when I was at work, I got a call like, hey, you need to come home. I'm like, he was fine. They're taking him the ventilator out, everything was going good. And so I got there the next morning and I noticed that he was sedated, his eyes were covered, and then there was a conversation that he didn't have brain activity because he had lost oxygen to the brain that the night before, the same night that he had hugged me and told me that he loved me. And I think he was tired. And so, yeah, that's what happened. It was traumatic in the way that everything was looking good. He had got healed from stage 4 cancer. It was a miracle. And then he was on the path to start living his life the way that he had previously lived it. So yeah, that was the time where when we talk about, oh my God, what am I supposed to do now? Even at 21, that's very new. Like looking from 37 back to 21, you don't know what you're doing. Like 31, it feels grown, but it's not. So, yeah, I think it kind of just left me with my hands in the air. Like, what now?
Mm. Wow. So listen, first of all, because today is, for everyone listening, today is July 25th. So we're recording on today, but this will be, of course, aired on Wednesday, coming up. So when Brittney mentioned today is, the date of her father's, death anniversary, it's July 25th today. First of all, thank you for taking the time, girl, because I didn't know. You didn't mention that because I would have asked. Girl, my heart is like, oh my God, like what? So hopefully I hope this is not a trigger for you. If it is, I'm here with you to walk throughout that process. But some things can be a trigger. And I'm saying that because like some things, like even like for me, like there are certain places like I'm like, "Oop, I'm not going there." In the beginning, it was real fresh, and you avoid those trigger moments, times, dates. And it's just, it hits different. So is this date affecting you any type of way, or are you okay?
I think I'm okay. So actually, I did a video earlier today, and I was talking about how sometimes we can take other people's grief processes into our own. And so maybe like 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh, I have to sit today. I have to process. I have to relive. I have to re experience. I have to be sad. And I think over these last 16 years, it's like, no, I just have to let the day be what it's going to be. If I get triggered, okay. If I don't, that's okay too. If I have happy memories today, that's great. If I don't, that's okay too. And so I think that right now I'm okay. 3 years ago, I was looking at my Facebook memories, and I remember on my birthday, I went to get a pedicure, and the salon was closed. And so I was like, okay. I turn around, and I'm about to go back to my car, but the street is shut down, and there's a full processional that's about to happen. In that processional, there are firefighters in dress uniforms and fire trucks with full lights gleaming. And immediately I was triggered back to my father's funeral processional. And
Mm,
so 3 years ago, no, I was not okay. I was standing in the middle of the street, and I could not, nothing was wrong, but just seeing that like took me back to that moment. And so, yes, there will be moments like where we're triggered, like you said, but there's also moments where you just have to go with the day, and we don't have to make it into something we think it should be. So I think that I've
yeah.
into this space now.
Yeah, because it comes in waves, right? It comes in like, moments like you said, because your dad was a firefighter,
Yeah.
right? And there are moments that, you'll have triggers that it'll just stop you. And there are moments where, one of the things that really blessed me, and I'm going back over my timeline, was when I had a guest on, and he spoke on how he honors his wife because he lost his wife to breast cancer. But he honors that date, like he sets aside a day purposely, like he sets aside a date purposely to
Mhm.
honor like his wife. And that just hit me because like I've never done that. Like I was just
Yeah.
like I would be the avoider, like, oh no, let me get my stuff, let me do something else. Until I started to like, okay, you have to like heal, and it's actually healthy. So that's why I wanted to ask you a pause for a minute and just ask about to date,
Yeah.
because, triggers are real, and how everyone navigates through them is very, very differently. So, and then so what was your dad's name again? His name?
His name was Felix Gardner, but we call my family called him Stevie. So
Stevie?
yeah.
Felix Gardner, and or Stevie, we honor you as well, Felix Gardner, Stevie. It's funny how families will give nicknames. My dad's nickname too was like something totally different than what his name was.
And his middle name was Steven, so it fits.
Oh,
But
okay,
my
okay.
family doesn't call anybody by their name, actually.
Okay. I was just mentioning that. I was like, no one calls me by my first name. I was like, I don't know why my parents named me my first name because they never call me my first name hardly. So listen, I look, we a trip. But now with all of that, like you have, loss of the both parents, events, it's impact sometimes on, how we navigate trauma, because that is trauma, a form of trauma. Like how did you navigate your grief, at a young age through your excuse me, your young adult years into your adult years, like you're, gotten married, you have children. How did that shape you as the woman, as the artist that you are today?
Yeah, I think therapy is huge. I advocate for everybody to go to therapy, whether you think you need it or not, whether you think you're in
Mhm.
a good space or not. Because what I realized is that I thought that I was grieving, but I was just kind of like existing. I was working. I went back to my normal, even though normal wasn't there anymore. And so
Mhm.
I think that you have to process. Prayer was huge for me. Being honest with God, being I don't think I ever really went through like an angry stage in my grief.
Mhm.
Maybe like disappointment that my parents weren't here, or my grandparents weren't here. But I think that being honest with God has been huge. Like, because we can get around friends and people that mean well, but they don't have the capacity. A therapist and the Lord have the capacity, right? When you can walk into a room, and I don't know if you've ever felt this, but when you start to tell your story about loss, it can suck the air out of the room, and people don't know what to say, or they get uncomfortable. And that's okay, because a lot of people that haven't experienced it, it feels heavy because it is heavy. It doesn't might not feel as heavy to us because we've experienced it. And so I think finding safe spaces like therapy and prayer, even if you have to write out your prayers, if you're speaking like from your heart, through your heart, in your prayers, whatever you have to do to like get it out, I think that has been essential for me.
So now let's go back for just a minute, because you touched on something important, I think, was a keynote that we need to emphasize here. You said you thought that you were grieving, but you were just really existing.
Yeah.
So what did that look like for you? Because I know a lot of times we, reflecting back for me, I know I was like I blocked stuff out, I was like, okay, back to whatever, but there was an existence like of what happened, whether that was, within whatever part of me. But what did that look like for you? What does that mean to like, you thought you were grieving in your own personal life, but you were really just existing?
Yeah, so my dad passed away the 25th of July. We had his funeral the 30th of July. We buried him in his hometown the 31st of July. I was back at work the week after. Back in school a couple months after that, because I was on summer vacation. And so it's like I just went back with the moment. I don't feel like I had the opportunity to express. I was just stuffing. I was suppressing. Because I felt like I had to keep going because I didn't have any other choice. Now I had to like work for a living. I didn't have that financial backing. And so I was just working and going to school and pushing through. Again, like I wasn't in therapy. I didn't know that resource like existed. And so I looked up maybe 2016, 2017, like, oh my gosh, like this has really affected my life and I haven't dealt with it. I've just suppressed it. I just kept going. And so what happens when you just keep going is you pause your life, you pause your grief journey at the moment of your grief. And so now 10 years later, 9 years later, you look up and you haven't grieved at all and the feelings are fresh, but to other people, you should have moved past that moment because it's been X amount of years. And so that's what I mean about existing. My grief had paused at the moment of my father's death, and it did not progress until I was able to express grief. Like even in the Bible, they have moments and times for mourning. Like the Lord allowed time for them to grieve the loss. He allowed them time to mourn. And that's not really taught. What's taught is, well, back then what was taught was this happened, they're with the Lord, rejoice, move forward. It's like, no, that's not how biblical grieving works at all, right?
Like, whoa, wait a
Yeah.
minute. Yes.
So yeah, they had
Listen.
time to put ashes on their heads and wear sackcloth and cry and grieve as a community, even, right? Because in some families, that's the norm, to just keep pushing. And it's like, no, it's not just the 7-day period between the death and the funeral. Like there's a whole moment after that, that we have to walk through.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's just not honored properly. When you lose a loved one, um, uh, like in human form, right? Because grief relates to many different things. But then when you lost, a family member, or you had a miscarriage or something like that, where it's just like, it's not honored. It's honored differently in different cultures, but certain communities and cultures do not, honor the process. And a lot of times it is, very rushed. I think often even within, our Christian communities and churches and things like that, it's can be a little bit religious, maybe, I don't know. But biblically speaking, like you said, they like, no, they was like, stop, we're going to mourn, and it, because it is, very, very necessary, right? And I just want to highlight this because even in the Bible, like you were saying, the scripture, right? The scripture says in Matthew 5:4, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. You know, it's like God telling you, I'm gonna need you to get that out. Like, just take your time and and go through it. But I'm curious, like, did anybody on your job, like, or at school, offer like some sort of like, hey, grief counseling is available at our, your place of employment or your school institution? Did they have that there? Or was it not a thing?
My job, they gave me a card, and put me back on the schedule. And it wasn't my salary. Like now, if that had happened with my salary job and my career, it would have been a completely different response. It was retail. Anybody that works retail, you know. So, it's school. Once I started like having trouble in school, they were like, "This resource is available," but I don't think I took advantage of it. I didn't. Again, like I had never known like what therapy was or what that would, you know, be. So I didn't take advantage of it.
Yeah. Did they just like give you a pamphlet or something, or they just said resources or a pamphlet?
Yeah, it was a
That's not
pamphlet.
enough. No, that is not enough. Because it's just like when you're in that mindset, you're like, oh,
Yeah,
okay, thank you. Like,
yeah,
you
this
know,
is
you're
just
not really.
another piece of paper. Yeah,
No, yeah, I'm really pushing. I would, I'm hoping, all schools, institutions, workplaces out there, because there are a lot of, places of employment still to this day, and, schools that are just like, they don't think about the secondary effects after, there's a loss that have occurred until, it happens to, to them. And they're like, wait a minute, where's the, because you just don't know what you don't know. But like you said, especially, back in the day, therapy was not like a thing, that was just like, let's go to therapy, let's talk it out, let's, it's not something that's pushed. So, I'm definitely an advocate as well, like you, for therapy. Go to therapy, pray, take it
yeah.
to the Lord, but definitely, get a therapist, a good counselor, that will help you walk through your situation. So, being that you have like, have had these, very significant pain points in your life as it related to, the loss of both your parents and things like that. Cause I'm pretty sure each transition was very difficult. Like, what exactly, outside of like when you went to therapy, how did that help you move forward, and how did prayer and like bringing God into your particular situation, how did that help you fulfill such deep losses?
Yeah, therapy helped because I was able to be honest, without fear of being too burdensome to other people. And then prayer helped because allowed me to get to know God. Reading scripture helped me to get to know God, helped me to know that He wasn't passive, He wasn't far away, that
Yeah.
He was my Father. There's a scripture that says that when your mother and father forsake you, the Lord will take you in.
Yeah.
And so you spoke about feeling like an orphan. And I remember feeling like that at the age of 21 because that's still very young. And I remember my cousin had commented on my Facebook status, like, "You're grown. What are you talking about?" And it's like, you have both of your parents, so you don't understand. And so,
Hello.
yeah. And so it took away that feeling of being an orphan, that I didn't have anybody looking out for me, that I didn't have support. So getting to know God through scripture, prayer, and then having the safe space of therapy, I think that helped to kind of undergird and kind of take away that feeling that nobody understood.
Yeah, I think the perfect example, because like when people, it used to irritate me so bad when people were like, have the whole, well, get over it. It's been X amount of years. Well, you should be doing this, like all the you should have, be doing conversations, or you should be at this place, or they would want you to move on. Why are you but I think sometimes, like you were saying, you had mentioned something before, it was at the tip of my tongue, but it's about like, where when you said that you did not grieve at the moment, you were just existing. So the moment that you start grieving, it could be 10 years later because you went into work mode, just like me. I went into life mode. I was like, okay, back to school, like, because I didn't want to deal with what exactly transpired, whether that was, somewhere I shut off, where, you have all the many different things that you go through during grieving. But then it's like when you're speaking to someone that has, suffered a very traumatic loss, you don't exactly know where they are in their grieving process. And many people, of course, if they've never experienced something like that, they don't know to ask, like, well, did you even grieve? Like,
Yeah.
and this may be why you're feeling like the way that you're feeling. So yeah, I used to get so irritated, Brittney, when people were like, you should be doing this and you should be here and you should be there. Like, you're not me. So I can't, I don't know what to tell you. Like, this conversation is not really helping me, but I think that's too, like, would you say it's so important to be mindful of like who's in your circle, who is exactly in your support group, and being able to understand the difference of like, okay, this person I need to keep around. This person is healthy for me and this person is not going to help my journey at all.
Yeah, I think it's tricky to say that, right? Because people just, they're not going to know what to say if they haven't been through it. So you can have a solid friend and they just not know how to support you, and you don't know how to articulate what you need support in. What I will say is helpful is to educate people. And so I've had back and forth conversations with a couple of friends, like, stop telling people to be strong. That's not helpful, because they don't need to be strong. They need to be weak. The Bible says that when we are weak, God is made strong. And so it's not our responsibility to be strong in moments like this. And so helping people to understand like how words can affect somebody who is grieving, I think that's helpful. If you find yourself in relationships or spaces that aren't conducive to your grief process, communication is always good. Like, hey, this is not helping me. This is not helpful. So yeah, I think that's safe to say, because I think that when we start saying like who is good for us in our grief journey, I think that gets tricky, especially if people are integral and helpful and they just don't know how to help.
So proper discernment, just kind of put people in their proper spaces. You being also, aware of like, okay, they just don't know, and not being like, block them, delete them. I don't want to talk to
Yeah,
you anymore.
communicating that that's not helpful. Like,
Right.
me and my best friend, I think we're good for that. Like, hey, this is not helpful when you do this. This is instead, like, instead of asking me if I'm okay, can you ask me how my mental is? Or do I have the capacity to do this? I have a few friends like, hey, what's your mental load right now? Do you have the capacity for me to talk to you about this? And so I think just like those healthy communications, whether you're grieving or not, actually, because life is just lifing. And so, like, whether you're grieving or not, just like being mindful of what others are around you are going through.
Yes, listen, I love that. Check in, check in. And I always consider, I categorize that under healthy communication, like learning how to be a healthy communicator in your relationships, all relationships, because that's important to me. Like I'm the kind of person, like, to be transparent, I give people a couple of tries. I have, especially if we haven't like developed that communication level, but I'm always one to like teach, but I'm like, okay, listen, if we can't talk a certain way, and I'm telling you to talk to me like this, or maybe we should start talking like this, then I'm like, okay, Lord, what do I need to do with this relationship? Because, I'm big on people in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. So I'm always like, well, what's the reason here? Like, am I supposed to, but, being mindful to me of how people handle you, especially if you're coming with your best, like, I'm handling you like this, don't handle me, just like I'm a piece of trash and you're just going to talk to me any kind of way. Absolutely not. Especially if you're not willing to learn, because that to me shows that you're insensitive to, this is a person, you're a person, we're both humans. So let's, care for each other properly. So I love the fact that you have circles that are like, let's use some different language when we're, talking to one another. Cause I don't know where you are in your mental, space right now, but let me just check in. Taking a minute to check in doesn't cost you anything, to do that. But it definitely shows the care of who you are, how you value your friendship. So I love that. I definitely love that. Something to incorporate, friends, into our own personal lives. So I love that, Brittney. So listen, so as far as like your let me go back, because I really want to touch on, if you can expound a little bit more. I want to go deeper, if we can, on faith. Like, because you have people out there that are not believers, right? They don't believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. They haven't come to that point yet. We pray that they get there. And you do have some people that are, believers, but they are having a hard time dealing with, as far as it relates to grief and losing, a loved one. They have a hard time expressing it, or they have a hard, or have been told, just to keep it moving. I've heard
Yeah.
ministers say this. I've heard, pastors, say, that they're not allowed to express like who they are outside of their church role, yeah, or their God given, role. They're not comfortable expressing that because they're not received well. And people expect you to, okay, I just lost, my mom, or I just lost this child. I just lost my dad. Like they want you to bounce back into, all right, get back to church. Like, let's, like, wait a minute now, or on the flip,
Yeah.
people that just don't know God. How would you, or what can you share to someone to, help them move forward in just, number one, being comfortable with understanding that God is, there for you. And then, on the flip for a believer, like it's okay to express your grief.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who are not believers will have questions on why things happen. Um, I think that comes to understanding the sovereignty of God, right?
Mm,
Because if I was an unbeliever, I would have questions on why my dad was on the right path of healing and then got snatched away. But I think what I've had to do is settle in my heart that God is sovereign. He knows, that means he knows all. It means he orchestrates all. It means he's in it all. And
mhm,
so the other thing is, I don't have the capacity to know what God knows. Like,
mm,
we don't have the capacity to understand everything. And so we have to settle in the fact that God does.
yeah.
And whatever the situation is, he's in it.
Mm,
But that comes by faith, right? That sounds crazy to somebody that doesn't have faith. And the only thing that I really can say is that with him knowing it all and orchestrating it all, he's in it with us as well. And so I would invite somebody to, to come to know God in that way, because living life and experiencing loss at such a great capacity, without God, I wouldn't be able to stand, right? I literally would have lost my mind. As far as believers, people in leadership, um, I I preached a sermon the day after I found out my dad's brother, my uncle, passed away.
wow.
And I remember walking into church. I remember, because it was a shock. Like, this was not expected. He was my dad's little brother. And this was in 2016 or
Mhm,
2017. And I remember kind of like the coldness of the expectation that I still show up. And I'm like, this is not right. And so it was like maybe 3 or 4 months of me like kind of like sitting in this is not right. Even my pastor at the time, he had lost his mother. And I remember talks of people like, well, when is he coming back? And I was saying to people like, do you realize this man just lost his mother? Like,
mm,
and that comes from people putting leaders on pedestals
right.
and making gods out of them instead of realizing that they're human.
Mm,
And so to leaders, I would say get off of the pedestal. It's
okay.
okay if people walk away or whatever the case is, because people have placed them there. And now you have the temptation to stand up to the expectation that people have of you, even in your humanity. And I don't think that's healthy or safe. And so that's what I would say to leaders, because I remember being there, being in my grief. Right after I had lost my uncle, I lost an aunt. Right after I lost my aunt, I had lost a great uncle. And I remember saying, I don't want to go to church today. And
Mm,
people saying, well, we need you. And me showing up and working the altar and saying, see, we needed you. And I remember like recounting this to my current therapist last year, and he was like, well, you needed somebody. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I did. And so being okay with being human instead of like leaning into the pedestals that people will place underneath you. I think that is huge for leaders in the church.
wow. For number one, being sovereign, you said, for those non-believers, that do not know the Lord Jesus Christ yet, and for those leaders and just people in church, period, that know the Lord, being human and get off that pedestal. Listen. First of all, let's go back. Let me go back to being sovereign because I was looking up the definition just in case I, want to share just in case y'all don't know. So being sovereign, as relates to God, right, means having supreme authority or absolute power, right? When you were saying that, I was just, I don't know, for some reason, Brittney, jokes come to me first, like how I relate, it'll be a joke, and I'm like, what is going on? But I saw like God, right? When as much as we want to fight the Lord, like I just lost my daddy, what is going on? Da, 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 da. Lord, I can't stand you. It's like God is like having us at our head, like I'm like, are you trying to get at God? But he's God. We don't know, like you said, everything. I don't know the backstory. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I'm not God, so I can't put myself in that position. But it does take faith. Your faith walk, I would say, like you were mentioning, to understand, like, okay, let me get out of myself. Like, this is a body. Like, we are not going to be here for the entirety of however, we're not going to live to 1,000 years old. It's not going to happen. It's not, at some point, all of us have to leave this earth. So you definitely have to find that place of peace within yourself to let's get this understanding together. But that pedestal piece too, especially about leaders in the church and, those people in prominent roles. I just feel like it's so unfortunate that we don't have the capacity sometimes to understand that we are all human beings. There is nothing supernatural about me and you. When I go home, I am not Super Shira. Like, I'm not even Super Shira at the church, like, or in my day to day. And so that piece, I always like, I never understand. People are like, well, we need you here. Like, to me, it's like, if you need me, I'm just one person.
Yeah.
If you need me that bad here, something is wrong. Because there's plenty of people, I'm pretty sure, that y'all can pour, or you all can handle it. But you have to allow people to be human and to take time away from whatever that is going on, to grieve or to take a vacation even, because if you don't, I feel like people will burn you out. Like, they will use you up, until like you just have no more to give and you can't allow yourself to get to that point. And I think it's a little scary sometimes when you are not allowed those spaces to, breathe for a minute, to, grieve, especially when it loses a loved one, because I can only, I don't know, I can only like just even imagine like what it does to you mentally when you're like, kind of, they're overlooking, okay, I just went through something. Like, I literally just, went through something. So, did that have like an impact on you as far as like, the church or any negative, or were you just like, what, let me just go to therapy. Let me ignore, their actions, not think of them in any negative way other than they don't know.
Oh no, like it definitely had a negative impact. It made me feel like there wasn't space for me not to be okay, and then that put me in the space of, well, I'm a leader. I have to show up this way. And so when I speak about like being put on a pedestal, I'm talking about past me too. Like, I had to get off of the pedestal. I had to tell people, no, I don't have a word for you today. I'll pray for you though. Like, I had to like stop. I had to stop perpetuating the pedestal. Like, that's why I said, like, get off of the pedestal, because you're able to. The point of us being ministers of the gospel, or servants of Christ, is not to be Christ. It's to lead people to him. It's to stand as the intercessor and the in-between point to point people back to him. And so instead of us trying to be him, we're supposed to direct them back. And I think that I had to learn that. I had to learn that in the culture that told me that I'm not allowed to be not okay.
That's good though. That is so good. Like, we're not Christ, we're not, because you can get caught up, it's the same thing I think in even in corporate roles, like you're the CEO, or you're our we used to call it like as far as like coming from a background in the military, you get so high in, leadership and in rank, you start getting this power concept, where I am this role. I'm like, I need you to come down. Like, come on back down to the ground here.
Yeah.
Like, we're not that, because when you start operating in that, it does give you this like, God complex,
Yes.
like, yeah, it does take away from, your humanity. So I'm definitely for like you can't get so caught up in the role, the position, the anointing as it relates to spirituality, and, take on this complex where you forget, like, you are a human being too. Like,
Yeah.
you have human, needs, and, why did God make us human? You know what I'm saying? He did, if he wanted to make us gods, like little gods, I'm sure he would have did that, but he made us human for a reason.
Yeah.
We definitely need to start paying attention, to that side of us as well, and the spiritual side, so absolutely. Now I wanted to ask you, for before we close out, so with your story, and all that you have been through, how has your story shaped the way that you carry, like, your parents' legacy today? I know you're a mother, you're a wife, you have children. So how has that shaped you? And what do you? I don't know if you see anything, or you're doing anything different, like through your children and your family.
Yeah, I think I just kind of like take how I was raised and apply what is applicable to my family. I think with everybody, whether your parents are alive or no longer with us, that there are things that we were taught that were good, and things that we were taught that are not good. And so, like, I taking the good parts and applying them. Just, I think for me, what's helpful is like memories, like good memories of my father growing up. Even though he's not here to be the grandfather, like, I know that he could have been. Just thinking about what it could be like, that's helpful. And as far as legacy, like, we all have our own legacy. So I'm living out my legacy, but I'm recognizing like the beauty of their legacy as well and what they left. And so I don't necessarily feel a responsibility to pick up, where they left off, but whatever is, carved out for me to do, if it is similar, I think that's cool. But if it's I'm not forcing anything, like, I'm just living the life that God told me to live. And if it brings out similarities from my mother's or my father's journey, I think that that's something that is in my DNA. Like giving, they were givers. I'm a huge giver. Listening to others, helping others, giving wisdom. I think those are all a culmination of like who my parents are, and just by DNA or by legacy, that's who I am too.
So how do you and your family define what legacy looks like to you all? What does that mean?
For me, I see legacy as a journey. I see legacy as a responsibility. And so, um, for me, like I said, I just see it as my own journey. And however the lines connect back to my parents, I think that that represents legacy as well.
That's beautiful. Because I mean, everyone legacy is defined however you define your own personal legacy and your journey. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But again, like in the context of the podcast From Grief to Purpose, I believe that everyone is called to a divine purpose, whether you receive it or not. But legacy is not always, I got to have 50 houses and the cars and all that kind of stuff. And legacy can be just the smallest of things. Those little steps that you take as well. So I thought that was that's it's just beautiful to me what you're doing and what you've able to overcome. And I want to go back and just mention, because like I mentioned earlier, that you are a three-time published author, a poet, a spoken word artist, and a entrepreneur. How can people learn more about like what you do? What is your website? Can you give us like your social media handles that they can follow? And everyone, I'm gonna of course put everything in the description, so that they can patronize and visit. But if you, being a published author, I know you also help. Can you tell us a little bit more about your business and what you do and centered around that?
Yeah, for sure. So I started a consulting company called Ready Writer Books. It's also the company that I publish my own books underneath. And what I do is I consult with future authors to help get a writing plan, to help make your dream attainable of being an author. I take the heaviness out of just all the things that go into publishing a book. I educate on different types of publishing, whether it be vanity, traditional, or self-publishing. And I just help others on their path, wherever they are in that path of whether it's writing or publishing, and sit down and talk it out on an individual basis.
Beautiful. Listen, I'm not gonna lie, I might be hitting you up afterward.
Please.
I may hit you up. I mean, I have self-published 2 books myself, but it's a lot of work, and I, was always like, "I need some help." So it was so timely when I'm like, "Miss Brittney, you don't even know, girl. I'm definitely about to be picking your brain about some future projects." But I hope that this conversation was helpful to everyone out there listening. Brittney, did you have anything that you would like to additionally say to our audience on today?
Yeah, just whatever your grief journey looks like. Just make sure you're not stuffing it or suppressing it, and just go along with the path of healing that God has for you, whether that's, talking to someone, whether that's, writing things out, however it is you need to get it out. Just get it out so that you're not stuck in the same space.
Absolutely. Now, you guys be sure to, again, if you are, because these are for the type of business that these are future writers, current writers, people that are thinking about becoming a writer, like Brittney shared, and I also shared too. I don't know if that was, obviously was in God's plan somewhere. We are both journalers when we were younger, so it formed into something for you, Brittney.
Yeah.
And she has a whole entire business, so you never know, whatever's in you, as far as being, a writer, what it could turn out to be. It could be something beautiful and something that people need. So definitely make sure that you hit up Brittney's website and find out all that you can. The website is in the description down there. So go and visit her website to be sure that you get support, because you don't have to do it by yourself. And I just want to thank you all for joining us on today's podcast. Again, if you have not subscribed, go ahead and click that subscribe button. But remember, we are here along this grief to purpose journey to, learn, to grow, and to heal together. So that's our time for today's episode, and we'll see you on the next one.
I know exactly